When I was a kid, my biggest dream was to turn invisible so that I could stand around cool people and pretend I was cool too. They couldn't chase me away if they didn't know I was there. That dream never came true, but luckily for little TechDweeb, his second biggest dream did. A computer that fit in my pocket so that I could play computer games on the couch, and while I'm still waiting on the invisible cool person thing, portable PC gaming is basically become everything I could ever have wanted. The Steam Deck was the first time that I got to sit down on my couch and play PC games in my lap and realize that, yeah, we live in the future now. But there is always one problem. The Steam Deck is kind of a big chunky boy, and Android handhelds have powers that PC handhelds don't. They sleep and wake instantly, they barely touch the battery on the low end, they're thinner, lighter, and way more pocketable. Isn't that right, Pocket Test Guy? I don't need your answer. It is. Ever since I got into retro handhelds, I've kind of been fantasizing about running PC games on them. And finally, the retro DOODAD gods answered my prayers. They sent us Game Native, an app that lets you log into Steam or Epic or GOG and run your PC games directly on the same device you use to play Mario and Sonic and Yonoid. The catch is that not every Android doodad can play the same games. Some are great for lighter stuff, some can play surprisingly modern games, but some are little electronic potatoes that should probably just stick to emulation. So today I'm going to show you what different levels of Android hardware can actually do. Because I get asked this all the time. Can this device play this game? Can that device play that game? How can I be as cool as TechDweeb? Hopefully after today you'll get some answers to your questions. I'll give you one right now actually. No, you can't be as cool as me. It's literally not even possible. But the other questions I can probably help you there. When it comes to running PC games on Android doodads, there are two main camps: Snapdragon devices and everybody else. Let's get this out of the way right now. If you're buying a device specifically for PC gaming, get a Snapdragon chip. Snapdragon devices use Adreno GPUs, which have all sorts of fancy driver options and compatibility wizardry that make PC games much happier. The other camp includes chips from MediaTek and Unisoc and others, and those use Mali GPUs, which don't get the same support. That doesn't mean that Mali devices are useless. Plenty of games will run fine. It just means that you'll run into more compatibility issues, more graphical glitches. If you already own a Mali device, absolutely try it. You might be surprised by what works. Just don't expect everything to work. Now, if you need help actually setting this stuff up, installing Game Native, logging into Steam, configuring games, preparing appropriate sacrifices to the Android doodad gods, I already made a full guide. There's a link in the thingy below. And as always, a quick public service announcement: PC gaming on Android is still pretty new. Not every game works. Some games require tinkering, some require more tinkering, and a few require the sort of patience that I don't possess. But a shocking number of games run just fine. Zero tinkering required. Actually, in my experience, it's pretty rare for a game not to run. For today's video, I have 4 test subjects. First, my RG476H, which uses a Mali GPU. This will represent the "let's see what happens" category. Then I have 3 Snapdragon devices representing the most common performance tiers. On the budget end, we have the Retroid Pocket 5 with a Snapdragon 865. This is like our affordable entry point. For the middle tier, I'm using the Odin 2 Portal with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. And for the high-end category, we have the Odin 3 with the Snapdragon 8 Elite, which is currently one of the fastest Android chips you can get your grubby little mitts on. Now, obviously I can't test every device and every chip ever made. I picked the devices and the chipsets that I think are the most relevant, the most common, the ones I've actually used and reviewed, and the ones that I'd actually consider buying if PC gaming is your goal. But before that, let's hear what UGREEN has to say for some important segue reason. Silly short cord. Why is life so hard? What's the matter, TechDweeb? Is your charging cable too short? Yeah, it's pretty rough over here. Lucky for TechDweeb, UGREEN Prime Day deal is here with a perfect solution with the new UGREEN Nexo Pro 200-watt power bank. Oh wow, it has a cable built right into it. Actually, it has 2 built-in cables, including a retractable USB-C cable that extends to 65 centimeters. That's exactly the number of centimeters I needed. The UGREEN Nexo Pro power bank can output up to 100 watts from a single USB-C port, and it can charge a 15-inch MacBook Air M5 from 0 to 47% in just 30 minutes. Oh yeah, that's perfect for my a MacBook. It even has a smart display to provide real-time charging insights. Wow, what a great idea. But that's not all. You might also be interested in the UGREEN Nexode Pro 160-watt charger, which can charge up to 5 devices at once with up to 140-watt max output and a smart display to give you the info you need. Yeah, okay, but can I just, Okay, TechDweeb, go ahead. Alright, and you too can check out UGREEN Prime Day deals, up to 40% off from June 23rd to 26th, linked in the description below. Thanks UGREEN for sponsoring the video. Let's start with our Mali GPU device and get that out of the way. This is my RG476H. I'll say right up at the front that it is not great for PC gaming. However, it is one of my favorite retro handhelds. Whole different thing. Retro games and PC games are not the same beast, and this thing is amazing for retro games. Mali devices can play some PC games, but performance and compatibility are gonna be hit or miss, mostly because of drivers. Snapdragon devices have better drivers, both the stock drivers and community drivers. Mali gets basically no custom driver love, and it's also missing support for some important features that some PC games expect. For example, Mina the Hollower is a brand new indie game that should be a perfect fit for a device like this. It's lightweight, simple pixel art graphics, except it's a DirectX 12 game. And Mali currently doesn't support DirectX 12, so it doesn't matter how lightweight the game is. If it's DX12, go screw yourself. You can't play it. And even for games that don't use DirectX 12, compatibility can still be a little weird. Most of the development work in the Android PC gaming scene is focused on Adreno GPUs, so Mali users are often left to their own devices. Pun not intended, but gosh darn I wish it was. That said, games do work, lots of them, but it depends on your device. There's some lower-end Mali devices that basically can't run anything. The RG476H is way more capable than that. I've been able to run a bunch of indie games and even some more impressive stuff. It is not a powerhouse, and getting games working can sometimes feel like a side hobby, but it can absolutely surprise you. So my advice is simple. Don't buy a Mali device specifically for PC gaming, but if you already own one, give it a shot. You might be pleasantly surprised by what runs. Moving on to the Snapdragon devices, and the good news is that all of them have solid GPU support, good drivers, and access to community-made drivers that can improve compatibility and performance. If you want details on all that stuff, check out my Game Native guide. For now, just know that Snapdragon devices are where you want to be if PC gaming is your goal. And also lots of high-end emulation too. Snapdragon's just really good for these things. The lowest end Snapdragon device that we're looking at today is one that I actually recommend quite a bit, the Retroid Pocket 5. This thing is fantastic. It runs pretty much all GameCube and PS2, a good chunk of Switch and 3DS, and for PC gaming, it is surprisingly capable. So let's do this by categories, different levels of games and the performance you'll get. For indie games, the Retroid Pocket 5 is a champ. Most 2D games and lighter 3D games will run without trouble, often at high settings, 1080p and 60 FPS, depending on the game, obviously. Then you've got what I'd call mid-range PC games, and also games from the Xbox 360 kind of era, like Fallout 3, Elder Scrolls, Tomb Raider, that sort of thing. These can work surprisingly well, but you'll usually want lower settings and should expect something closer to like 30 or 40 FPS. When we get into modern AAA game territory, like Assassin's Creed and Witcher and Cyberpunk stuff, big fancy graphics, for that stuff, don't bother. The Snapdragon 865 just doesn't have the horsepower for that level of game, and RAM becomes a problem too for that high-end stuff. Still, for around $200, getting a pocketable Steam machine that can play indie games all day and dabble in some older 3D PC games is pretty impressive if you ask me. Nobody asked me, but if they did, that's what I'd say. Mid-range devices with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 are where things start to get really interesting. We get a huge jump in performance, enough RAM for most games. The device I'm using here is the Odin 2 Portal, which is my current favorite Android handheld for PC gaming. I love this thing. It's thin and lightweight, but still big and comfy. The screen is fantastic, the controls are great, and with the official grip, it's one of the comfiest handhelds I own. And somehow, despite the tech apocalypse, it's still only $250. That's for the base model with 8 GB of RAM though. If you're planning to really push PC gaming, I'd consider spending more for extra RAM, but it's a pretty big bump in price beyond the base model, so only consider that if you really need to. As you'd expect, indie games are no problem at all. The nice thing here is that you can run them at full 1080p on this big beautiful screen. 120Hz too. Xbox 360 era games and older 3D titles and lighter weight 3D titles are where this thing really shines. Depending on the game, you can often get close to 60 FPS and run them at higher settings. However, personally, I still tend to run those games at 720p and lower settings just for the battery life gains. But that's just because I avoid battery anxiety at all costs. I have enough anxiety without the battery thing on top of it. Modern AAA games are where things get a bit messy. You can still get stuff running. I've seen people running like Cyberpunk, and some newer games can be playable with enough compromises, but you're going to be turning the settings down, making sacrifices to the graphics gods, and generally just managing expectations. This is not a max settings at 60 FPS machine for that stuff. But for around $250, being able to play basically every indie game you can think of, most older PC games, and even some modern AAA stuff if you're willing to tinker a bit, that's a pretty impressive package. That's what she said when she considered buying an Odin 2 Portal to play PC games on. And now we come to the high end. Devices like the Odin 3 with a Snapdragon 8 Elite chip. This is currently the top of the Android PC gaming mountain if your goal is maximum performance. This is where you end up at the top of the mountain. There is one little caveat though. The Snapdragon 8 Elite uses a newer GPU, which means that driver support isn't quite as mature as some older Snapdragon chips yet. That's not a deal breaker. You can absolutely run a ton of games and the performance is fantastic. Just understand that if you want the absolute bleeding edge, sometimes you gotta bleed a little. The good news is that things are improving fast. When this chip first launched, custom drivers barely worked at all. Now we're seeing compatibility improve constantly with new drivers, new game native updates. It's been exciting to see how fast things are improving. Anyways, back to our game categories. Indie games are kind of ridiculous on this thing. The Snapdragon 8 Elite is so dang efficient that you can run most lighter weight indie games at the lowest power profile and barely touch the battery. Mid-range PC games are also no problem. Xbox 360 era games, older 3D games, all that stuff runs great. And you can often play at 1080p with good settings and still get excellent battery life. This thing is honestly kind of absurd. The amount of performance that it delivers compared to the amount of battery it uses feels like Ein broke physics to make it happen. With modern AAA games, this is where the Snapdragon 8 Elite really separates itself from the rest of the things. You'll still probably want lower settings and usually 720p if you want the best performance, but a good amount of modern stuff is genuinely playable and enjoyable. And even when you're rendering at 720p, you can use FSR upscaling to clean up the image quite nicely. And the scary part is that it's only getting better. Every few months, compatibility improves, performance improves, and more games become playable. So if you're the kind of person who wants the best Android PC gaming experience available right now, this is probably where you want to be. So that it kind of leaves us in a weird place, because the whole point of this video is figuring out which Android handheld you should get for PC gaming, but as usual, the answer is, it depends. I'm sorry, I know you hate that answer. But like, if you're mostly interested in indie games and older 3D games, something like the Odin 2 Portal is an easy recommendation. It's powerful enough to handle all that stuff comfortably, and at around $250, it's still an incredible value. If you want something a bit cheaper and more pocketable, the Retroid Pocket 5 is still a great option. But if you want to push modern AAA games as far as Android currently allows, then you're going to need to step up to something like an Odin 3, or a Portal or Thor or iNeo thing with more RAM, or another Snapdragon 8 Elite device. Just be prepared for the price jump, because once you start going for maximum performance, things can get expensive in a hurry. Personally, my favorite handheld for PC gaming is still the Odin 2 Portal. It's big, comfortable, lightweight, has a gorgeous screen, and it lands right in the sweet spot where I can play pretty much everything I want to play. I mean, I've said it several times, but I gotta say it again. Every time I pick this up, I keep wondering how it's only $250. Although I suspect that somebody at Ein is eventually going to notice and fix that mistake. It can't stay this cheap for long, considering that everything else in the world is skyrocketing in price. One final thought before we wrap up, a bit of a public service announcement. If you already own an Android handheld, even a Mali device, you might already have everything you need. Maybe the question isn't how much power you have or RAM or whatever. Maybe it's just what you're trying to play. I know it's tempting to focus on the flashy AAA stuff, but honestly, indie games are absolutely incredible right now. We are living through an indie game renaissance, and that's where most of my favorite gaming experiences have come from lately. So just don't get too caught up chasing horsepower. Don't give in to the FOMO. Some of the best games you'll play this year will run perfectly fine on hardware that's nowhere near the cutting edge. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. And that's it from me, but now, if you have any questions, requests, or just anything that you'd like me to explain in a video like this or whatever, any other video topic, let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, notification bell, algorithm, gobbledygook, YouTube, whatever. I'm TechDweeb, thanks for watching, bye-bye!